Welcome back, guys. Thanks for joining in again for another episode. So, here we go. Today, I want to talk about this South Sudan oil pipeline to resume operations soon after repairs of the February damage. So, before I jump into this, I'm going to give you some historical context of what happened. So, as it mentions, back in February of this year, an oil pipeline got damaged, and as a result of that, obviously oil wasn't being pumped going from point A to point B. So South Sudan, which is right here, is an image to orient yourself about South Sudan, its neighbors, Sudan, Ethiopia, Chad, etc. So South Sudan got its independence from Sudan back in 2011 after a massive civil war that took place over there over a very, very long time. And the separation of the two countries left South Sudan with most of the oil infrastructure that the former country used to have jointly. So, as it currently stands, oil is being produced in South Sudan, and then there's a pipeline going from South Sudan all the way through Sudan to the ports of Sudan, and then from there being shipped off to the international market to make money. So that pipeline is about 1,500 kilometers long. As mentioned in February, parts of that pipeline got damaged. That damage was a result of the conflict that's happening in Sudan currently. That conflict hasn't really come to a resolution in Sudan, and there had been massive fears that South Sudan was going to be in a lot of strife because of that damage. The reason is simply because South Sudan currently heavily depends on oil as its biggest moneymaker. The pipeline from South Sudan going via Sudan to the ports is, like I mentioned, about 1,500 kilometers long, and it transports roughly about 100,000 barrels of South Sudan's crude oil per day. So hence why this is the biggest moneymaker. Pretty much if you're reading online, you'll find out that about 90% of the foreign currency earnings for South Sudan are the result of this whole crude oil pipeline. So hence why I'm talking about this today. So lots of reports out there a few months back were all indicating that South Sudan was going to be in a lot of deep water because this pipeline was damaged. And when it got damaged, it was pretty much open-ended as to how long it was going to take. People estimating a few months to even longer, because people will need to be able to access the pipeline in a warring zone. So hence the uncertainty that was there. So now reports have come in suggesting that this pipeline is obviously about to resume and continue operations, which will be a much needed relief for the government of South Sudan. The most frustrating thing about, I guess, this story from South Sudan really has to do with the fact that 90% of the country's revenue comes on just this one product, right? So which makes them so dependent on external forces that they cannot control. They can't really control what happens in Sudan between the warring factions within Sudan. So if another event occurs that results in another pipeline being damaged, they can't really influence that. They can't really influence that and stop that from happening. So it's a positive thing that the pipeline has been fixed, but at the same time they need to diversify and enter different markets so that their country and their people are not so dependent on this one product. You can't really be so dependent on one product alone. It will leave you so vulnerable and unable to do work and produce results for your people. This seems to really speak true about a lot of other Southern African countries that are so heavily dependent on one particular sector to be their biggest moneymaker. For example, one of the places I'm talking about is like Botswana with their diamond production. The only difference with them and a place like South Sudan is the fact that everything they're producing in terms of diamonds is within their government's control. It's internally within their own borders, and they seem to have managed that quite well with beneficial agreements between the private company that's mining and producing the product and the state. That relationship seems to have worked well for them, and why Botswana has continued to just be nice and stable for a very, very long time. I think while being dependent on one particular product to generate the foreign currency that you might need to sustain your own country might produce significant revenue, but the downfalls for that is that it makes you so over reliant and very vulnerable to what happens externally. The prices for whatever you have might plummet and go down, or wars might break loose next door, and you can't really do anything about that. So it puts people and countries in such a terrible position. And South Sudan and many other African countries need to really do better with this respect. They need to diversify and enter other markets and lower their chances of failure if something ever happens to one of the industries that they were mostly focused on. So it's important that we do this. All right. So please tell me what you think about this topic. Leave some comments below. Let's get talking and share your thoughts. I'd love to hear from you guys, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching and tuning in today. If you haven't, as always, please subscribe. I'll see you next time. Bye.